Hey guys, welcome back to After Hours. Tonight we have Adriana, and her story is just quite remarkable. Adriana popped up on my Instagram like a lot of my guests, and I started seeing her story, and it just really kind of spoke to me. She we talk in the episode, about underage drinking, and she's, living in, the east coast of United States. So her drinking was way underage because, as I'm sure you all know, the age for alcohol consumption in the US is 21. She was working in restaurants from the age of about 14, 15, and drinking with her restaurant buddies, but then also doing it at the weekend with or time off with her high school buddies. So she was kind of seeing the kind of the grown up side of the alcohol, and the kind of kid kind of drinking in the park and school playground after hours. And it was just really kind of full on right from the start. We kind of talk about the similarities between ourselves of, going up to the bar and, like, two for us, one for them when we're getting the rounds in. But the most remarkable and tragic part of this story, at kind of 28 to 30, she was taken into hospital on kind of her boss's kind of advice, saying, you don't look well. She was yellow, and she had ascites, which is like the swelling, liquid retention on the belly, which is a sign of liver damage. And this was all at 30. And even in the hospital, she's still lying to the doctors, telling them, that her drinking habits aren't actually what they are. Oh, I like to have a drink, but not much, and all of that stuff. But the doctors, they can see she's lying. She's in a bad way. And what they had to do was they put her in a coma to try and save her, to try and save her life. So, buckle up, guys, and sit back. Adriana's got an amazing story of just, really, really, really bad, in the thick of it, alcoholism. And, she's out at the other end, and showing us hope that, it can be almost like death's door, but, we can manage to turn that around and save ourselves. So, yeah, as always, guys, listen for the similarities in Adriana's story, because it is quite remarkable. In asking Adriana to come on the podcast, I really had no idea quite how, rough a ride she had. And all it was from, kind of socializing and drinking with buddies, and how it escalated. So, this disease does not discriminate, and it can happen to anyone. So, please heed these podcasts as a warning. So, yeah, as I say, buckle up, listen for the similarities, and listen to Adriana's story. Thanks, guys. See you at the end. Adriana, welcome to After Hours. How are you today?
Hi, Jimmy. I'm doing so well. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, well, it's good morning. You're in New York.
Correct. I am in New York, 1 hour from the city.
And are you New York born and bred? I mean, I can hear a bit of an accent there. It's very cool. I love New York.
Born and raised, and it's funny because everybody asks me if I'm actually from Long Island because of the way
Right.
I speak. I don't know why I speak this way, but yeah, I'm from a place called Westchester, New York.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, no Long Island here.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
funny. This is the way I think everybody speaks, but I guess not.
Well, do you know what? I'm from Scotland, so my accent, I just assume everyone talks the way I talk, and then people go, "Oh, you're from Scotland." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have an accent, don't I?" So yeah, I I visited New York in 2004, so 21 years
Okay.
ago, and I absolutely loved it. It was an amazing city, just had so much kind of fun, and yeah, it was just a bit of an eye opener, but a really kind of diverse and yeah, just multicultural and
Well, if you ever make your way over the pond, as they say, come
yeah.
on, let me know.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely will do. Anyway, we're completely getting off track there, Adriana. So, yeah, what we want to know is just, kind of like how your childhood was growing up in Long Island and when you had your first drink.
So it was Westchester, just so
Ah,
you know.
sorry, Westchester. My apologies.
No, okay. So basically, I had a good childhood. I had two parents that stayed married. They're still married to this day. We did have, my father was a highly functioning alcoholic.
Mm,
My mother came from a family of drinkers and mother, father, brother. So she went, I always think there's like two ways you could go, and she basically went the other direction. She really was never a drinker.
mm,
With that being said, my father, a lot of people have horror stories of the behaviors of their alcoholic parents. Don't have that experience at all. My
hmm.
father treated us wonderfully well, was good to us. His drinking was done when we were asleep, so
Sure.
that was that. Growing up in Westchester, it was good, but I did very early on start finding a way to kind of get into the escapism of life, and that was at the age of 15. I got my first job working in a restaurant when I was 15. And I was basically introduced to a lifestyle that I probably shouldn't have been introduced to at such a young age. I was hanging out with the 17, 18, 19-year olds who were hanging out with the 22, 23-year olds.
Yeah.
And I was being brought out to bars and stuff at that age and, let in with no problem. Oh, she works, with all these people that are restaurant workers who tip well and, they're
Yeah.
going to come in and spend money and whatever. And that was life. It was like go to school, go to work, go out after work. And, at that age, you're invincible. You could get up the next day and do it all,
Of
So
course. Yeah.
that was my first introduction to alcohol for sure.
Wow. And obviously, the US is no drink before 21, legally. So that's
Yep.
quite an early age to be like for us it was a bit different. We would be, yeah, we'd go, I mean, I think maybe 16, 17 we could get into bars, but before that we'd be kind of like drinking in the parks,
Right.
getting maybe adults to go in and get us alcohol or I had a bit of stubble by the time I was 15, so I could go in and it was like they clearly knew I wasn't 18 as it is over here by law, but we were getting away with it, and it was yeah, it was different times as I said before. But for you going into that whole, I suppose more of an adult kind of arena by going to pubs and bars and things like that with older kids because they're still kids to be honest, 17, 18 year olds. So yeah,
And I was still, besides that, those were my restaurant friends. And then my regular friends were doing what you were talking about. They were doing bonfires in the woods,
yeah,
and we would take trains down to the city so that we could get into these restaurants that didn't care, like
yeah,
Chinese restaurants we'd go to and get pitchers of beer, and we just very quickly house parties with whoever's parents were away, and that was what we did.
yeah, yeah. And so how did that kind of develop? What was your kind of school life like, as in like high school, and then did you go to college or anything like that?
Yep. So I finished high school. And the thing is I was captain of the soccer team, captain of the volleyball team, homecoming queen, like all those things.
Wow.
I still didn't feel as if I was right or accepting of those things, but I
Hmm.
was. And then I went to college. I stayed home and went to community college, and I did a year and a half of um education after that. I only finished with an associate's degree.
Hmm.
And but having a job like working in the restaurants, I was making a lot of money for my age.
Yeah.
I was able to make a great living for myself, and I saw that as, awesome. And I said, what are all these people breaking themselves to go to school, get these degrees, get corporate jobs where they're, doing all this when I can do what I'm doing, which is work in a restaurant, take off, come and go as I please, plan trips with friends
Yeah.
and always, be around the kind of people that drank like me
Yeah.
and, drink after work with me and all this stuff. I found that my way was the right way. So I don't know what everybody else is thinking, but this is the way.
Yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you mean, Adriana. I worked in bars from as soon as I could from when I was 18. I was pulling pints, and I didn't have to get up early in the morning because all my friends were going. I mean, I did do a bit of college, but the mainstay for me was bar work because I could sleep in, start maybe like 12 o'clock, and then the same group of people that we would have our days off, which maybe would be like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but we'd go out and get completely, shit faced, and then we'd work at the weekends. But after we finished our shift at the bar, we'd all go out to clubs after that, and it was just. I was like, what are all these people doing the 9 to 5 thing? I was like, that is not for me. This is where it's at. And
This is
and
the
I
good
like
life.
yeah, like you, I would say became a veteran of the bar work and restaurant work because I quickly moved up to being like assistant managers in a few places. I did have my own pub for a bit, and it was like king of the hill almost. It was like this. Why wouldn't I want to do this? I love drinking. Didn't realize the dangers of it at that point because to me it was just like I can socialize, I can have fun with my friends that I work with. And I can have a few pints behind the bar, and as long as I didn't get completely sozzled, it was the way to be. So that was kind of your chosen career then through your 20s, and
Posing
yeah,
up to my 20s, I only left the restaurant business a year ago. I'm 39 years old and I just
right,
left last year. So I stayed all through and through, same thing. I was working in one restaurant for 13 years. I worked in another restaurant for 10. In both, I was in supervisor positions as well as bartending. So you
yeah,
combine all those different ways of making money and you're doing just fine for yourself. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like from my experience, it's quite a hedonistic way of life as well because you are doing all the same shifts as your colleagues and that, and so when you do get the time to have time off, all you want to do is go out because you see these people coming into the bars on a Friday, Saturday night, and you're like, it's almost like jealousy because they're out there having fun and you're slaving over, you're kind of pulling pints, you're serving tables and all that. So all you want to do when you kind of get off shift is go and drink. So yeah. So when do you think you noticed that it started becoming an issue?
I think I started to notice that it was an issue by the age of about 20.
Hmm.
I started dating a gentleman who kind of introduced me and normal sized me to drinking at home.
Hmm.
Kind of like, oh, we get done with work, and if we don't want to go out and spend all the money we just made, let's go and just drink at home and play darts and whatever. And that quickly escalated to when I wasn't with him, when I was home at my own house. I was like, well, I would be doing that if I was with him, so I'm going to make myself a drink. And
Yeah.
I was always I ended up having a cross addiction. I had an eating disorder. I was bulimic at
Right.
one point. So I was very conscious of what I drank and ate. So of course, I was not a beer drinker because that had too many calories.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a vodka drinker from the go and go because I could have a vodka and a diet mixer of some sort. So I found myself making drinks, pint glasses with vodka. A 2 ounce pour didn't exist. It was a half a glass, and a half a glass of seltzer and drink that. It
Yeah.
only took me two drinks before I was, obliviated.
Hmm.
And that was like just became normal to me very quickly, to be living like that. So on the nights that wasn't out, I was still drinking. So I knew I was doing more than others. I wasn't willing to admit that or think it was a problem,
Hmm.
considering most of the people that I hung with were the same. They were doing the same thing, whether they were going home on their own or going out, everybody was still drinking pretty much every day. So it was,
Yeah.
oh, how am I different than anybody else? I'm the same.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. And, I was the same. Like, I mean, I would have pints if I'd go out with friends, but it would be pretty quickly before maybe 1 or 2 pints, and then I would get on to the shorts, and vodka, whiskey, rum, whatever. But for me, it was like because the whole point in drinking was to get wasted. So the quicker I could get to that point, it was like this whole thing. It was like, oh, people were trying to sustain the night and maybe not become inebriated, and I'm like, well, what's the point? That just wasn't on the question on the cards for me. It was like, I want to get something that's going to get me as quickly to that point as I can possibly, do. So like, yeah, as you say, like vodka, whiskey, whatever, it was a quicker way of doing it. And I suppose looking back, it was like, I would have been the drunkest person in the room, but my tolerance went up quite high. So people, and like even doing that thing where I'd go to the bar to get shots or to get drinks in for other people doing the round, and I'd be necking other stuff up at the bar before going back to the table. So people are like, why is he a bit more? I suppose some people thought maybe he can't hold his drink, but it was just because I was drinking faster, quicker, harder than anyone else. But the problem with me was I wouldn't stop and I wouldn't, there wasn't an off button, so I would continue doing it. And I didn't seem to ever have this. I had friends who would like, they'd maybe be sick in the toilet or they would pass out and they'd have to go home. Whereas with me, it didn't matter how kind of drunk I got, I could always stand and I could always weirdly get myself home. So it was, there was no kind of question of me stopping doing it, if that makes sense.
I can definitely relate to everything you're saying because I was exactly the same way. It's funny, people would always say to me, why are you like from 0 to 60? It's like you're fine and then you're not fine.
Yeah.
And I actually had a nickname called, nicknamed me Gumby. Because here in the States, there's a character named Gumby who is like, he's very pliable, movable, like, the baby. Basically, it was a nickname because I was legless. I would
Right.
go out and wear high heels, and there wasn't a night that I would go out and not take a huge spill, like a bad fall, because
Yeah.
I couldn't control my body. I was so drunk, you know what I mean? And it was a joke. Nobody really pointed it out in a bad way. Everybody's like, "Oh, look at Gumby. Here she goes
Yeah.
again. She took another spill. She hit the ground and held onto the cigarette. She didn't even drop it. What a champ." It's
Yeah.
like, it's like, "Oh, okay." So yes, I can relate totally with the, having one for myself and two for everyone else, or two for me, one for everybody else type deal.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I know we're laughing there, and it's funny kind of looking back because we kind of came out of it mostly unscathed, but it's like I suppose we got to kind of laugh at it, but that's what everyone was doing back then. And if you did have a spill and a fall and oh she bumped her head or this or that, but yeah, it was almost like a badge of honor if you fell over and you still had your bottle in the hand and it didn't crack, and it was like, way, and that's the kind of mentality of kind of drinking going on in back in the day. So did your friends and kind of peers in that, did anyone ever kind of say to you, oh, we're all doing this, but you seem to be doing it a bit more? Was there ever any question about that? The reason I ask is because I've been speaking to a few of my friends from back in the day, maybe mid to late 20s, and they've said, oh, we're glad you finally got sober, and I'm like, what do you mean finally got sober? And it was like, oh, we knew you had an issue back then. We thought you knew that you had an issue back then, and I'm like, what? And then the more I think about it, I'm like, did I know I had an issue? Probably, but did I know that it was damaging or causing any, friendship mishaps or anything like that? Because at the end of the day, I wasn't really upsetting people. I was mostly upsetting family, but again, most of the time they weren't really in the situation, so they didn't know the extent of it. People just thought I was, for want of a better word, I don't know if the term lush is the right thing, but just a kind of drunken, that's how I live my life, a kind of party guy and not really caring about the consequences. And they all kind of saw that, but I guess I didn't see it or didn't want to accept it.
Well, that came at a progression for me, I would say, because at first, yeah, it was all fun and games, and then as I progressed through my alcoholism, there were certain events that triggered my alcoholism even worse.
Mm.
And I think that's when people started to notice that there was a little bit of a problem here. Unfortunately, I experienced a lot of death in my 20s. My best friend passed away.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Multiple coworkers of mine had passed away. So there was a lot of, and I mean, there was no coping without alcohol for those scenarios. I mean,
Sure.
but I got a pass, it was like,
Yeah.
she's got, this is what she's going through. So we have to understand it. And then there was obviously one very significant time that is what, spiraled my drinking out of control, which is what led me to a very extended hospital stay.
Hmm.
And that was, I was engaged to be married. And I found out a few months before my wedding that my ex-fiance was cheating on me. And that was crumbling to me. And after that, I don't even think people knew who I was anymore.
Hmm.
I didn't do anything other than get up, go to work at 6 o'clock, and then turn around and, stay out till midnight, drink, excuse me, Ruby, go out and drink and everything else. And um, then rinse and repeat the next day. And I had to drink in the morning and I would stay out drinking all the time. And it was really, really bad. So people started to notice then that there was an issue, like, well, as to why she can't handle this. You know what I mean? What is
Hmm.
going on here?
Yeah, and sorry to hear about your loss, through that period, and but like what you say, it's a pass. It's kind of like we have got reason to, it's an excuse to kind of go, well, this is what I'm going to do to deal with this. And I guess people accept that. And after a while, if we're continuing to do that, either they kind of just accept it and let it go, or with me, I think I did a thing called geographical. So I would just move to another kind of area, another city, another totally different place, and then just set up myself up with, like, a new group of friends who were drinkers, and I would, just kind of do that. I'd keep in touch with my old buddies, but they wouldn't see quite how progressive my alcoholism had got, because they were just seeing things maybe on Facebook or the odd chat on the phone here and there. And that's what I did for a long time. I just kept on moving along. So it kind of, I never let it catch up with me, so that people could go, right, you need to do something about this, and that's the kind of the way I was living.
Well, that's the thing, is that when you decide to relocate, the thing is you take yourself with you. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
think the relocation at some point will change these habits. And unfortunately, it doesn't. On the other hand, was polar opposite, where I had stayed all along where I grew up and everything else. And
Hmm.
I never changed my location, because I just kind of knew that wasn't going to do anything for me. At that point, I had thought about it and thinking of picking up and leaving, but I was engulfed in so much fear of, like, would I be able to make it on my own out somewhere in a different place without my family and all this stuff? And they enabled me so much. And you know, uh, never really brought my stuff to light until I
Hmm.
got sick, and so it was like, oh, well, I always have them. I always have them close to me to help me when I get myself into some type of shitstorm, because that's
Yeah.
what I did,
Yeah.
and that was part of why I never went anywhere or did anything, in that time.
Yeah. And so what you were saying there, that it kind of came to a kind of head with your kind of illness. So tell us a little bit about that, and what, kind of prompted that.
So yes, like I said, after the broken engagement, and the way I was living, it took about 2 years for it to kick in, but I started to turn yellow. I
Mm.
started to have ascites of the belly, where my stomach was protruded and very hard, and I
Yeah.
was no longer able to keep down any food or drink or alcohol. I would just get sick every single time I tried to have something. And of course, that didn't get me to go and seek help, because I was just so scared. And it was more about how do I manage this? Not how do I stop drinking? How do
Hmm.
I manage this, or how do I, get out of this situation that I'm in? It was brought to light by my boss. He said, "You just look awful. You look terrible. Like you need to go to a doctor because something's wrong, you know?"
Like your eyes were yellow, or and your flesh as well, or just the eyes,
Well,
both.
my skin,
And how old
sorry,
were you at this point?
I was 28.
Wow, so young, and to have a settings as well at that age is just yeah,
Well, actually, let me stand corrected. It began around 28, and by the time I got into the hospital, it was 30. So yes, it was 30,
yeah,
30
but
years
still,
old, and I had yellow eyes, yellow skin. Like I said, my stomach and swelling and everything else was bad. And that was when I went to the hospital and they said, "We can't treat you here." And they sent me to a specialty hospital in my area.
mm,
And when I got there, they asked me my lifestyle, like what do you do? How are you like this? What's going on? And at that point, you know, I still was kind of lying a little bit, holding on to something like, yeah, well, I drink, but like not that much to do
of
this, like which was a lie, it's not
course.
even true.
Well, they can see that.
And
I mean, you're yellow. It's like they
yeah,
know.
you can't hide it. And
Yeah.
they're like, I said I haven't had a glass of water probably in 2 years. I barely eat. I just drink a lot. You know what I mean? I did be truthful about that part. So what ended up happening there was they decided to put me into a coma in order to let my body heal a little bit.
Jesus. Right.
And when I was put in the coma, unfortunately, nothing was healing and nothing was getting better. And they shared with my family that there really was a very low chance of me surviving this,
God.
and
Right.
that to make arrangements for me and get a priest and all the things. And
All this is
my
going on
family,
while you're, sorry, all this is going on while you're in the induced coma. Yeah. So this is
yes, and I
happening.
was filled in. Yeah, I was filled in
Yeah.
about this. So
Crikey.
then I woke up out of nowhere one day, and I just remember the the nurses and the doctors all like bum rushing the room because I was like awake. And then basically they said, she needs a lot of stuff right now. I needed a blood transfusion. I needed dialysis. I needed just a lot of help. And as
Yeah.
they were doing all these things to me, they were hoping that I was going to get better. And I wasn't, and I just
Mm.
wasn't getting better. So then the next thing I remember is my sister coming into my room and sitting down next to me. And I only know this now because I was filled in, but she had a tape recorder in her hands. And she said to me, Adriana, if you don't make it out of here alive, what do you want us to do with all your things, like your house and your car? And I had a 3-month-old niece at the time. I said, I don't
Hmm.
really care what you do with any of it. I want you to give everything to my niece. I said, I don't need, and my sister was like, okay, and with that, I was kind of like, well, maybe I won't make it out of this thing alive. But at
And
that point,
you,
I was so.
have you, so you were saying you don't really remember that. Have you heard the recording then? Is that what's kind of,
No, I haven't heard the recording. I don't know who has possession of that, but my sister
sure.
was like, "Yeah, I went in there
I
and
wouldn't
asked you."
book
I
you.
was on a lot of pain medication,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, when I asked you those questions, I was recording you." And I was like, "I had no idea, I didn't know a lot of anything."
Sure.
And then like, I went sepsis, I had pneumonia, like every time that I was taking a couple steps forward, getting a little better, I was getting knocked back. And it
Yeah.
was just like, and then all of a sudden there was a turn where I started to have better numbers day by day by day.
Yeah.
And they were like, there's some hope here. Like, we've got some hope. And I wasn't able to walk or anything like that because I had been in bed for so long, and my body had completely just shut down. So I started to try to rehabilitate a little bit in the hospital. I was taken in a lift and taken out of my bed and put in a chair so I could just sit up for a little while. And then I was
Yeah.
put back in the bed, and I do this all throughout the day to the point where we got to where I was in a wheelchair and I was using a walker trying to get to walk. And then the way that I was allowed to leave the hospital, which was about 2 months later, was that I had to be able to walk up 3 stairs and walk down 3 stairs in order to leave, and I had to be off of all IV medication.
Hmm.
So they slowly started getting the IVs out. I slowly started to practice walking every day. I got up those stairs, got down those stairs, and luckily 2 months later, I left the hospital.
So 2 months in total. How long were you in the induced coma for?
A week and a half.
Week and a half. And what's that? I mean, obviously you don't have any recollection of that, or were you? I mean, it's such a weird concept for someone that's not been in that. Is it like sleeping, or do you
Yeah, you're
dream,
like
or
sleeping. All the only thing I remember from A to B in that scenario
yeah,
was like right before the coma was induced, I had a liver biopsy,
yeah,
and there was a bunch of like people looking at me, and they were just trying to figure out like, getting parts of my liver to see what was going on.
hmm,
And
hmm,
then I slowly remember one day being in bed and going to sleep. I don't remember anything until waking up a week and a half later and those seeing those doctors run towards me. I woke
yeah,
up and I said to my mom, like, how long have I been asleep? Was
yeah.
I thought I took a long nap.
You thought like
And I said,
24
how
hours,
long have
maybe
I
36 hours, yeah, but like
yeah,
a
I
week and a
and she's
half.
like, you've been out for almost, a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And I'm like, huh? Like, it's terrifying to think about, like
Yeah.
holy.
So
And
did
it
they
was
say like anything about like liver transplants? So what's your liver like then? Explain to the listeners what's going on with that.
Well, by the grace of God, thank God, today my liver is in good standing.
Hmm.
So it was diagnosed back then that I had the beginning stages of cirrhosis of the liver. There are 4 stages.
Yeah.
I only was in stage one.
Hmm.
And when you're in stage one, it's very livable, it's very doable to live with it. So I go once a year to my liver specialist and get checked
Hmm.
to see, my liver numbers, the enzymes, all that stuff. I have a endoscopy done where they go in and they check all the veins to my neck because of liver damage can cause you to have a heart attack.
Right.
So I'm on a beta blocker where that keeps my heart rate at a good rate so that I don't suffer from a heart attack.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my liver isn't okay. They did tell me, but because I was young and healthy before this happened,
Hmm.
it didn't take years off of my life, which
Right.
it was a very reassuring thing to hear because I thought I was surely going to have a liver transplant or something to that effect. But as of today, that is not the case. So,
That's amazing news. And I had a friend that I met in rehab, and she came in a very similar state. She was yellow jaundiced, and I think she does have liver damage. But because I think she was just 29, 30, so very similar age. She's been told that yeah, you're gonna be okay, but you cannot drink again, and that's kind of, sometimes with people when you're told by the doctors this is going to kill you, it's still not enough. I think I was told that
well,
I
it
didn't have
wasn't for
any liver
me.
issues. So yeah. So what happened when you came out? Was that it? Done with booze?
Absolutely not. I wish that was the case, but not it.
Yeah.
So I was able to stay sober from alcohol for a brief period of time. By brief, I would say about a year and a half, two
Okay.
years.
Okay. And did you do
And then
anything to, sorry, but and did you do any kind of meetings or anything? It was just the shock of this incident in the hospital that had kind of shook you to go, right, I'm not drinking again. Yeah.
correct. The doctors gave me every piece of advice they were supposed to give me. You need
Yeah.
to go to AA. You need to get help. You need to seek outside help. This isn't over just because you got sick and you're about to get better. Like you need to fix this. And I kept saying to them, okay. And then in my own head, it was they don't understand. This was very situational. This is
Hmm.
all because of my ex fiance, the blame game. This
Yeah.
is all because of him that I did this. And now I got scared straight and I'm not going to drink. Like they're crazy. I would never,
Yeah.
this is the thought process of a alcoholic, and it's like, that, like I said, that lasted about 2 years. In the meantime, I started smoking marijuana because, and I wasn't a marijuana smoker beforehand,
Hmm.
but I needed to supplement with something.
Of course.
And I was using it to sleep and everything else. And that became my new buddy, but I was sober,
Hmm.
And so it was about 2 years before I picked up a drink again. And it was like I was on vacation and I'm like, all right, I'm going to have a drink because I'm on vacation. I deserve it. I have been sober for so long. One's not going to hurt me,
Yeah.
blah, blah,
You do.
blah,
You deserve
blah,
it.
blah,
You've done
blah.
so well.
I
Yeah.
deserve it. And then, to be completely honest, I was able to come home from the trip and not touch a drink again for 6, 7 months.
Mm.
Um, because I was so scared, like, God, I can't have anything more than that. But the next special occasion, here came another drink and another couple more that time.
Yeah.
And then the mental obsession started to kick in of the making the connection of, well, when I'm away, I can have a drink when I'm away
Yeah.
because I'm on vacation. It's not real life. And then I started planning more trips away, you know,
Yeah.
and here I am going away every 3 months and on 3 months having drinks.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to, I got into a 5 year relationship, 4.5 years actually. The my partner was a active drinker and I was trying to stay sober and I was trying not to drink, and it just was impossible. It was impossible by the end to not, because I just was surrounding myself around it. I wasn't changing my people, places, and things and the kind of
Yeah.
behaviors of people that I was around. And then the relationship ended. And that's what sent me into a full blown relapse for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, I was still drinking more in that relationship than I had been in prior.
Hmm.
And then the full blown relapse came afterwards. So,
And see, that's the thing. Our brains kind of tell us little by little. It's like this entity that just feeds off of us, and it's like you're kidding yourself that, yeah, well, you know what? If I go away for a holiday, weekend or whatever, I can do it, and then I can come back. But it little by little, that just eats away at you, and it's like before you know it, your drinking habits kind of ramp up again, and then you've had that breakup, so that's like the excuse, that's the reason to drink. So it's like, well, let's go full steam into that. And so how long did that last when it was the full-blown relapse?
so that lasts for about a year and a half. And it was a
Wow.
year ago now in May where I started to really notice that I was getting bad, pretty bad.
Yeah.
So by last June, I ended up losing my job of 10 years. I my
And
my owner of my restaurant.
was this the same like restaurant owner that kind of said to you in the beginning, you don't look well, you need to get and and like
Exact same owner.
so he'd obviously got to the end of his tether with that. He's like,
Yeah.
we got you better. And how was your family when you were going through this year-long relapse? Were they just like, "Pff, what are you doing?"
They didn't know. They
They
didn't
didn't
know.
know. Yeah.
I was able to
Hiding.
hide it from them. I was able to hide it, from a lot of people because it's not like I did it out in the open. This is where my pure isolation drinking began.
Yeah.
I didn't want people to know what had happened. So I was drinking at home by myself. And again, like I said, my boss sees this happening. He says, when does my reliable woman is becoming so super unreliable again? Like, I don't know what to do. You do this again, you call out of work again, that's it. And
Hmm.
I said, okay. And with that, it took me 2 weeks before I called out of work. That wasn't even enough. It was a lot, but it wasn't enough. And then we fast forward to August, where it had gotten really bad at that point. And I had missed a couple very important family events. I had missed a funeral of my aunt. I had missed my nephew's birthday.
Hmm.
And, my mom's spider senses really started to go up. And she decided to pop at my house one day to check on me.
Hmm.
And that's the day everything changed. She basically jumped over my patio gate and opened my sliding glass door that wasn't locked, and she saw me sitting in my apartment drinking. And with that, for the first time in my entire life, my mother smacked me in the face 3
Mm.
times and said, "You are a liar, and I cannot believe you're doing this," and walked out of my apartment. And I dropped to my knees and had head in hands, like, how could I do this to the one woman who loves me more than anything, who sat there and watched me die and
Yes.
come back to life? And here I am. She's looking at me doing it all over again. And I could,
Yeah.
the smack didn't come from a place of anger. It came from fear.
Yeah.
She was so scared, like, what is going to happen to my daughter? And as I laid there on the floor, I said, I have to do something. I can't do this again. I don't want to do this again. And they say you really do come from to a moment of like pure desperation. And I had it. And I
Hmm.
said, I'm going to go to rehab. I think it's time. And I called a local rehab here, and they said, well, we have a bed for you, but it's 3 days away. I said, great. That gives me enough time to get my things together, AKA drink for
Yeah.
another 3 days.
Yeah.
As I sat in my apartment as woe is me and drank away. And then I left on that Monday morning and I went to rehab for 28 days and 4 days of detox, excuse me.
Hmm.
And that was when my life changed. It was the best decision I ever made in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm guessing it was Librium detox 4 days and just rattling about. And then was it a 12-step kind of program in there, or was it more open to, I don't know, smart
It
or?
wasn't it wasn't focused solely on on AA. I will say we had a lot of AA speakers.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the funny thing is that I did go to the library one day that was there, and I said, I'm looking for the big book. And they're like, we don't have it here. I said,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, you guys have had me listening to AA meetings every night, and you mean to tell me there's no big book here for me to look at and, kind of
Listen to
read a
Bill's
little bit? And
story or
they're like,
Jim's story. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't really get it, but I said, okay, whatever. I spoke with one of the counselors and she was like, listen, I know it's not here, but I'll bring it for you if you want to
Yeah.
see it. I said, I do want to see it. My way has not worked. What can I try differently that will help me fix this problem? Like, I'm open to anything. I'm at
Yeah.
that moment where anything you tell me to do, I'll do, because I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to be like this anymore. Um,
Yeah.
so with that, I did as I was told, which was I left rehab at 12 o'clock on Thursday. And by Thursday night at 7 p.m., I was sitting in an AA meeting, my first AA meeting.
Hmm.
And I did the same thing the next day. I woke up, there was a 7 a.m. meeting, which is now my home group,
Hmm.
a 7 a.m. meeting that I went to, and I fell in love with the early morning of it. And I became a member of my home group. And I wish that I could sit here and say that was the last of it, but there was one more spout.
Hmm.
I made it through my 90 days. I did 90 meetings in 90 days.
Yeah.
I went back to my rehab and spoke. I went to the doctor who gave me a clean bill of health after having this relapse and me being so fearful that something I had done more damage and
Yeah.
everything like that. And then I walked by something in the supermarket that looked good to me. And with that, I bought it. I went home, and that spewed me into a 2 week full blown bender. And I
What
said,
was
I
it? What was
can't.
it that what was it that spoke to you? What bottle was it?
It was this
Nectar?
disgusting, it wasn't even that. It was this disgusting, and it makes no sense either when I break
Yeah.
it down in my own head. It was this disgusting drink that's new here in the States, and it's called Beat Box. And it's like a little juice box that has like 13% alcohol in it. And let's be serious, it wasn't necessarily the drink, it was the percentage. And I
Yeah.
looked at that like, I never tried that. I never tried that. I really want that. Because let's be serious, I stopped drinking for the taste a really long time ago.
Yeah.
And with that, I didn't call my sponsor. I didn't talk about it. I didn't do anything. I did what I wanted and I grabbed it and I went on a 2 week bender, and I woke up on December 16th and I said, I have to stop. I
Yeah.
tried
Yeah.
and I was shaking and sweating and I said, no way. And I called my rehab and I said, I know I was just there 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but I need to come back for detox. And
Hmm.
they were shocked. I went back for 4 days in detox. I came out, went right back to my program. And by the grace of God, I'm 158 days sober today. So
Amazing.
thank you, God, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for that. And
Yeah.
I've been still, I go to meetings almost every day, either it be in person or in Zoom. I'm working step 4 with my sponsor currently.
Hmm.
I'm doing things like this to keep it on the forefront and green for me of what
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like if I slack back even for a day.
Mm.
I need help. And I
Yeah.
was a fool to think that I could do this alone forever and try to fight this demon forever by myself without
Hmm.
help, and that it was a personality thing. Oh, I'm strong, I can do this. It has nothing to do with anything like that. But what I am grateful for is listening to somebody for once and going to a meeting and putting aside what I believed something was as opposed to what it actually was. And
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that I for once listened. That I can
Hmm.
say.
I mean, there's so many kind of similarities with my story, and that's what they say, listen for the similarities and not the differences. I spent 28 days in rehab. My rehab started 3 days before we went into the first lockdown in 2020. And so it was a big shake up for me. I always thought before I can do this myself. I'm a strong person. I have no problem. I can do this. I couldn't. Kept on falling. Broken relationships, friendships. At the end of my tether with my family, I got put in there. I did my 28 days. I stayed sober for 55 days after once I came out. It was 55 days in total. Something happened and I went straight back, got myself 4 cans of Stella, bottle of vodka, and I was offline. We were in lockdown. I was away, couldn't get out to see family. So no one was kind of able to, intervention, put an intervention on me or stop me. They were just like on the end of the phone, but I wouldn't answer the phone. So that kind of happened, and that went on for a couple of months. Then I moved to here in the Isle of Man from the UK, and it was the same as you. I went to hospital. I had to get another detox, and I got my 4 or 5 day detox. And I said to myself, when I was taking that first tablet of Librium, I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get myself sober and stay sober this time. I ended up doing 90 meetings in 90 days without anyone telling me. It was after that. And I was like, oh, what's this 90 meetings in 90 days thing? And they were like, oh, that's something that they say in the fellowship. And I was like, oh, I've done that and more, because I was going to meetings that we could. And then I was doing Zoom meetings and I was doing this and I was doing that. I threw everything I could at it. And I was like, people say, oh, I'm not into, I don't believe in God or that. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You don't have to believe in God to go to the fellowship. For me, it wasn't AA, it was NA. Even though drugs were never a big thing for me, they never took hold of me as much as alcohol did. Alcohol's a drug, let's be honest. So for me, that militancy and that structure was what I needed at the beginning. And but for me, it was like, I'm going to do everything. So some of the meetings I was going to were smart. I was doing other things online. I was reading the Quit Lit. I was watching stuff on YouTube, even watching Sandra Bullock's 28 Days. That's amazing film. And it's just, I was a sponge to it all. And I hear people, asking me like, well, what do you recommend? And I'm like, this is what I did. All I'm doing is suggesting to you. And they're like, oh, but I don't know if I can do the meetings. And I'm like, well, you know what? Don't do them. I'm not telling you to do it. But for me, I had to do everything that was available to me because, like you, I was a hopeless case. And I know there's gray area drinking and this, that, and the other. But for me, it was like I had to do everything and anything because it was, jails, institutions, and death, and I didn't really fancy the third one, so I really had to do everything I could, and that'll be 5 years in August since I got sober, and you're at 115 days, did you say?
158, but
158.
congratulations to
My
you.
apologies.
5 years is amazing. I mean, you
Yeah.
have what I want, like they say, and that's why I'll continue to do what I'm doing, you know.
And you'll get there. And that's the thing that we learn. It's like the not survival rate, the recovery rate is something ridiculous. Like 2 to 4% of people that are in addiction actually come out the other end. That's less. it's a smaller percentage than some really serious illnesses that are being treated at hospital. So if people aren't going into the meetings, because I know a lot of people go, I don't want to go to the meetings, then this is why I want to do the podcast and other people do the podcast. Because those stories, like you're saying, people shares, that was the most important thing that I needed to hear back in the early days. And if I can bring people's stories like yourself to people that, aren't going to go to the meetings, then this is what this digital age is kind of bringing forward. It's not just a bunch of guys sitting in a room anymore. It's getting it out there and making it available to everyone, so that, like what you said, we don't want people to get to how bad you were. We want them to stop it when they recognize it's having a negative impact on their life.
Right. And I have to totally agree with you on that part. And, when I was getting sober and I needed something to do, let's be serious, we all need something to do.
Yeah.
And it came to me to start my sobriety journey, sharing it on social media. And it was a big reasoning of it was because, how many people were like me who were against the program because they didn't know anything more. And I was taught in rehab that could work.
Yeah.
But there are people that don't get the chance to go to rehab and don't get the chance to have what was given to me.
Hmm.
And if they may stumble upon my sobriety Instagram page and they read and they're starting to see things, if it inspires them or helps them not pick up a drink for one day, for 1 hour, then so be it. I am so happy that that could be a part of that. You know what I mean? Because we all know it's move a muscle, change a thought.
Hmm.
So if you're searching and you're Googling, because that's all you can possibly do at that very moment is how the F do I stop drinking? And I
Hmm.
pop up on your feed and you read about it. I feel as if I've done something to help somebody
Yeah.
as well as help myself. And that's what it's about. So.
Absolutely. And it's just giving back what was given to us, and that's the whole power of, like, peer mentorship of, lived experience. Because I understand there's loads of counselors and key workers and things like that maybe haven't been through the same situation we have. Okay, they might know some of what they're talking about, but the lived experience that we've been through it, and we're showing people, you know what? It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out and say, I can't do this alone, because there's other people out there that have done it, and they're like, we didn't do it alone, but now we can help you guys. And I love your Instagram page. I think I saw it. I think you came up on, is it Open Sobriety, the kind of group sharing page that they have. And I saw your page, and I just thought, yeah, here's another one that's absolutely brilliant, and just helping the cause. And for you to be doing it from such an early stage, and I'm still early stage of sobriety as well. I know people that have got 20 years, and for me it's like, oh my God, it's so unfathomable. But I don't want to get there just yet, because that would put 20 years on my life, or 15 years of my life. So it's nice to see people like yourself that are 158 days sober, and just kind of just screaming it out there. I'm sober and I'm proud, and I want to help other people.
And I feel like it needs to be done at all stages. I mean, please, there's always going to be people that criticize and they're like, how could you come out and say all this stuff? You don't have enough sobriety
Oh.
under your belt to be saying these things. And I say to them, there is somebody who doesn't even think that 2 days is possible, that doesn't even
Hmm.
think a week is possible, that doesn't even think a month is possible. So, yes, they need to hear that the person that felt the same way is now, even if it's 158 days, it's
Yeah.
158 goddamn days. That's something that seems so unattainable to us when we're in the grips of this disease. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
Yeah.
people need the experience, the strength, and the hope, no matter what part of it you're in. And you know what? I want to hear the old timer in my meeting that has 38 years just as much as I want to hear the person that's walking through the door and has 5 days, because I'll take something from every single one of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Adriana. So if you could go back to when, your drinking kind of started, and you've got two paths in front of you, the one that you're on now or the one where you don't drink, which one would you kind of take if you had that chance?
I would take this one
Yeah.
because of the way that I'm learning now how to deal with life. If I wasn't given these challenges, there's just no way I would have the ability to turn into the person that I'm becoming through this journey. Um, it is teaching me I always say like people could use AA that aren't even alcoholics because the principles that they teach you in your life can be applied whether you are or not an alcoholic. And let's be
Yeah,
serious, I needed a guide. Even if I was not born an alcoholic, I would have been needing to learn these tools somewhere because I wasn't learning them anywhere else. I
yeah,
know that. So I can be very proud and say this is the path that was the hardest and the hardest on the people around me, and I feel bad for that, but I wouldn't change it because I'm grateful to know what it's like to struggle and how good it feels to come out of it. I definitely can feel grateful for that.
yeah. No, I absolutely hear you, and it's just so true that this way of life, from what I've learned, I started drinking when I was 14, so I didn't let myself mature because alcohol was just keeping me in this state of kind of immaturity, and just almost like in a cryostasis. So when I came out and I was 14, I got sober. I had to do my growing up, and within the past like for nearly 5 years, my life has just become so much better. And all I did was give up one thing, and it's just like my life now is just unimaginably more beautiful than it ever was. So what advice would you give to people that are, like you said, just kind of, even 0 days or 2 days, if they're just setting out in this journey, what advice would you give them?
My advice would be you literally at that early stage, I don't even want you to think about a day at a time. I want you to
Mm,
think at hours of the aspect of hours at a time, getting through an hour to an hour to an hour and making connections with sober people that can talk you through those early stages because we know how strong the urge and the craving is, and we know what you're feeling, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And reach out to somebody who you know has gone through it. We all know somebody who's sober. I mean, I'm pretty sure. And if you don't, you can step into a room of AA. You can find a group like Smart Recovery. There's so many resources in this day and age.
yeah,
So I would just suggest not thinking too far ahead, thinking about the hour or 2 hours in front of you and make it to a day, to the next day. And the rest of it, I promise, will fall into place because I thought that that was never possible for me. And
hmm,
I never thought I could think that way. But the minute that I let go and I started thinking that way is the moment that I got a reprieve of this kind of pain and sorrow that I was in. So
yeah, yeah. No, I love that, and that's just, I completely agree with you. And it's just, not about kind of giving up. I took me many, many relapses and many rock bottoms to really kind of go, this is it. This is my life now, and I'm not going back to it. But back then it was hour by hour, day by day. So Adriana, would you say you regret getting sober?
regret, absolutely not. Getting sober has now changed everything, the whole trajectory of my life at this very moment. I
Yeah.
mean, if I got didn't get sober until I lost my job and I almost lost everything. All that did, we like to talk about what is taken away, and I'm trying to focus on what's been given to me. I got a new job where I am obsessed with it. I'm working in the dental field as a concierge, and I am so happy. I'm so well liked by my coworkers, my doctor that I work for. I've met amazing connections in AA where I have a social life that is super healthy for me,
Hmm.
where I can be around people and we have activities that we do together that don't revolve around drinking. And in a world that revolves around drinking, this is
Yeah.
something so different for me. I've started to make personal, deeper connections with just other humans, and it
Yeah.
has changed everything. So there's not one regret that I have. Do I regret that I didn't get it sooner? I do, but guess what? That wasn't God's plan. It wasn't what
Hmm.
he had in mind for me. And I'm just going to be grateful that he kept me around long enough and kept me here to do what I want to do now. So
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. No, I completely adhere to that. And so, do you? This is just a kind of new thing I'm kind of adding on the podcast. Have you got any recommendations for like quit literature book or like a film about recovery that you've watched recently or at all?
So I haven't, the one thing I'm gonna say, I guess I don't want to tailor it only towards if you're in AA,
Hmm.
but I just watched My Name is Bill W. and is the story of how AA came about and Bill W.'s story. And
Yeah,
it's incredible to show the early beginning of how trial and error showed the dynamic of how connection was the opposite of isolation and how that they were able to create such a wonderful program that has saved so many lives, you know.
yeah.
So or even if you're questioning AA, I definitely suggest maybe trying to pick that up.
Hmm.
And when it comes to literature, I can't necessarily say, but I'm going to be completely honest. My biggest tool has been Instagram.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
sober women in my age group, other sober people that connect, and I can see their story and know what they went through and know that they were sitting in my spot.
Hmm.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. So that's definitely the tools that I use and keep in my toolbox.
Yeah, and I love that. And Instagram, even in I kind of dipped into it before I got sober, the sober Instagram. But even in the past 5 years, it's ballooned phenomenally. And I know there are a few toxic accounts out there. I've not really dealt with them or had to deal with them, but I know they're out there. But the majority of it for me is just support and love and just kind of trying to encourage people to stay sober and get sober. I was talking to someone last week and we were saying the ones that I enjoy the most are when people are coming up and I'm like, I'm on day one or I'm on week one. And I just like, I'm on there, I'm typing encouragement. I'm like, go, you got this. And I just absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I love it. It's such an amazing community. Where can we find you on Instagram? Now, I will put this in the kind of description of the podcast, but what is your kind of handle on Instagram?
So it is the age of sobriety. So it's basically the and then age ADGE of OF sobriety. And it stands, and age is my nickname. And in this day and age, I feel as if sobriety is the only way. So that's just where it comes from.
Absolutely love that. And I think, I've spoken about this before. I think there is a shift happening. I think the younger people are really kind of changing their ways. They're not like us, and it's not there's so many other things to do, but when we were younger, we were just like, oh man, this glamorous life of alcohol and partying. They're not doing that anymore as much. I might be wrong, but from what I can see, they are a much more healthier bunch and they don't seem to want to get inebriated as much as we did.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've seen a total shift in the States here of how many people smoke cigarettes. There is a
Yeah.
massive change. There are so many less. Unfortunately, vaping is still a big thing. And I only say unfortunately because to each their own. I don't ever
Yeah.
suggest people getting sober from everything at once and cutting everything out of their life that they need. I don't suggest that, but I just say, unfortunately, because it is still, trading one for another. But cigarette smoke has decreased so much here. I'm hoping to see the same kind of decline with alcohol here because. It's not that cool anymore to be the guy that stinks like a cigarette. It's just not.
Yeah.
So maybe it won't be that cool anymore to be that lush in a bar. So.
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. I heard the other day in 1988, the World Health Organization in 1988 classified alcohol as a Category 1 carcinogen along with asbestos, tobacco, and radiation. So why is that not being spoken about more?
Did you,
1988 to 2025. Come on, guys. Like let's be open and tell people this is a poison and it's killing you. So stop doing it, you know?
Exactly. I hope that stigma still comes and happens because the fact that it's so glamorized and used for every occasion, sunny days, rainy days, special occasions, weddings, funerals, I
Yeah.
just can't understand why it's been pushed this long and we wonder why there's so many suffering alcoholics and addicts in the world. So, I really hope there is a change in the dynamic for everyone's sake.
Yeah, no, I love that. Adriana, thank you so much for taking your time out to speak with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and as I say, I love your account. And long may it last. So thank you for putting yourself out there and sharing your story with us. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Jimmy. This was a pleasure. And again, I hopefully we'll do it again sometime soon. And if you ever get over here, you come find me.
Absolutely will do. And the same for you. If you're over this way, then give us a shout. Love speaking to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Adriana. You take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you, Adriana. Absolutely, devastating, heartbreaking, and then, 158 days sober, the hope that that brings. So, thank you so much for coming on and, sharing your story, not just with me, but on your Instagram, doing that and showing, and sticking your fingers up to the people that are saying, oh, you've not got enough sobriety to tell your story and all that. That's absolute bollocks. You need to be shouting your story out there to stop and help people, to stop people drinking and getting into the state that you were in. To come from such a low chance of survival and the talk of priests around your bedside when you're in a coma, making arrangements for what they thought was the inevitable is just, horrific to hear. And then to start getting results of your your observations at the hospital and starting to walk again. But at that stage, you've only got stage 1 liver damage, and so lucky to kind of, be diagnosed with just that. Not as you say, the 4 stages. You're only at stage 1. And you'd think that would be enough to, Adriana, to just stop there and never drink again. But, as I know, and I hope that people listening are starting to realise that sometimes isn't enough, because the disease is the addiction is so strong, and it just takes hold of a person so entirely that, she went out and started drinking again. And it's just absolute insanity. But I have to keep saying it. The recovery rates are like 2 to 4% of people in addiction, and it's just, that needs to change. It really does. So yeah, thank you again, Adriana, for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us. And I just hope you keep going from strength to strength with this, because we need to remember that it is always there. We're only one drink away from slipping back into it, and a 1,000's too many, and one's never enough. So stick with it. Keep sharing your story, and likewise I will, and everyone else's stories on the podcast. So yeah, things are good with me. Just trying to get into the old spring summer routine with life, and living in my new digs with my lovely fiance and our kids. Life is good, man. I'm enjoying it. It's we're all just kind of settling into our lovely equilibrium, and life is good, guys. So as I've always said before, all I did was give up one thing, and coming up on 5 years in August, and I'm sober. I'm proud of myself. I do give myself a pat on the back sometimes, and I just can't believe how lucky I am. But also, it's that whole thing about if you start putting the work in and showing the universe that you're willing to make changes and make your life better, then doors start to open for you, and that's what it's all about, really. Do good things, and good things will come back onto you. So yeah, as I say, we're going week to week, we're going strength to strength, and the podcast is building. So please share it, guys. If you're enjoying it, then whack it on your Instagram story with the link for Spotify, Apple. I'm now on YouTube, which is it's not video yet, but that might come later. But as I've said on the podcast, I don't want to do video yet, because people have to set aside time to watch video, and I listen to podcasts just in my ears, and it means I can get on with stuff and do stuff while I'm listening to these amazing stories. And so at this point, as I say, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, many others that I'm not even aware how many it's on, because that's what Spotify does. It just shares it out to. So if you do listen to a podcast on a different platform, but you've had to listen to this on Spotify or Apple, then let me know, and I'll try and get it onto a different one. So just let me know. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay sober, and stay supportive. Hit the 5-star review. Share it, and write me a little review. Let's hear what you're thinking about it. I know loads of people put it on the Instagram or on Facebook, but put it on the platform so that other people that, you know, maybe aren't on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you know, can see what the podcast's about. So let them know. But until next time, guys, take it easy and peace.